Welcome back to the channel. The focus will now shift back towards FPL after extensive UCL fantasy coverage, and there will be more Champions League videos and live streams over the next week. And also keep your eyes peeled for the best wildcard team for Gameweek 35, and also my team selection, where I only have one free transfer, and the deadline stream on Saturday will answer all your questions as I usually do. And check out all the links in the description to continue this conversation to my X, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, the Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. The same goes to my Patreon and the championships, as we're very close to 100 members on YouTube alone. So thank you very much to Napstars and Paredes for gifting so many memberships. I've lost count now over the last couple of live streams, and you can see the most transferred in players in FPL at this point of the game week. Bryan Mbeumo is top, and we've got Cunha, Gvardiol, Marmoush and Visser in the top 5. Some of those players will be highlighted today, and I'll also discuss them in future videos and podcasts, and others would have been covered already. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. The first purchase I'm going to recommend today is Jarrod Bowen, but the main bit of advice I can really give you is to save your transfers and not make any moves until we get official confirmation, because it is expected that we get an official announcement before the Gameweek 35 deadline about the doubles in 36 and thus the blankers in Gameweek 37. And we also have games on the Thursday in the Conference League, the Europa League, and also the final match of Blank Gameweek 34. So it's really important to hold off on those transfers because injuries could happen there, maybe a suspension, and you've also got that announcement that could change things in terms of the players you really want to buy. But as things stand, I think Jarrod Bowen is one of the best midfielders you can purchase in FPL. He has 9 goals and 10 assists this season and decent underlying numbers across the board, and those fixtures look very promising. He faces Tottenham at home next, then Man United away. Nottingham Forest at home looks a bit tougher, but still doable, I think, in terms of return. And for Gameweek 38, Ipswich Town away, I think Jarrod Bowen is a great option there on the free hit. And if you still have that particular booster and we get no doubles or blanks, I think Gameweek 38 is a great time to use the free hit chip. And Jarrod Bowen also has an XGI figure of 13.93, 154 FPL points, and very low ownership at 9.2%. His XG is 7.45, 12 big chances, 10 big chance created, and 49 key passes. West Ham are very inconsistent, but Jarrod Bowen rarely goes more than 3 games without a return, even this season with West Ham languishing in 17th in that Premier League table. So I think Jarrod Bowen is by far the best West Ham midfielder, and the only other option in this position that I'd favour over him is Bryan Mbeumo, who was discussed recently. Having said that, it's worth mentioning Bryan Mbeumo once more. He is a template pick, so if you are looking to go differential and chase rank, I don't think buying Mbeumo alone would be that sort of differential you're looking for, but captaining him against Man United in Gameweek 35 could be one such differential. The same goes for Gameweek 36, which might end up being a double game week, and he faces Ipswich Town away. So I think that's the kind of way you can turn Mbeumo from a template pick into a sort of differential who can gain you rank by captaining him in the next 2 game weeks. And you can also partner him with a lower owned player like Jarrod Bowen in the midfield, and both of them have been highlighted in my recent best wildcard team videos. Bryan Mbeumo has 18 goals this season, 7 fantasy assists, an XGI figure of 18.99 and 210 FPL points, but we'll see how he does on Thursday against Nottingham Forest, and his price is still rising. It's currently 8.1 million and it could even go up to 8.2 million very soon. He has had 19 big chances, 16 big chance created, and 63 key passes. So in terms of the stats, he is superior to Jarrod Bowen. He also plays in a better team, and he's on penalties. So there's a lot to like here with Mbeumo, and I would favour him over Jarrod Bowen, especially for Gameweek 35. But buying both at the same time could be a great way of separating yourself from the rest of the pack, and I think that's one of the best combination of midfielders from now until the end of the season. You can still buy Visser up front even if you have Bryan Mbeumo. I think that offensive double up in Brentford is worthwhile, and you do have Sharda and a few other Brentford assets that you might want to consider, and they've got a high ceiling in individual game weeks, but they won't offer the consistency of Visser or Bryan Mbeumo. And in the case of the Congolese striker, he has 15 goals, 5 assists, 28 big chances, and 159 FPL points. I also feel he's captainable in the next 2 game weeks, but Mbeumo has the advantage with the penalties, also being a midfielder in FPL with the extra point for scoring a goal and keeping clean sheets. And Visser also has good underlying stats across the board. Now, the creativity isn't anything special, only 3 big chance created and 25 key passes, but 74 shots with 62 of them being inside the box, and the XG itself is 14.77, and he's a good finisher, so more often than not, he will bury his chances, but there are the odd occasions where he can be quite frustrating in front of goal. But I think generally speaking, he'll offer great value at 6.6 million, and he's also a differential compared to Brian Mbeumo, and going for both of them simultaneously will be a mega differential in of itself. I keep saying that word in particular because at this stage of the season, it will be difficult to separate yourself from the rest of the pack, and the gains will be quite difficult to achieve in your mini leagues and also the overall standings. But if you do go for these differentials and low owned picks, you give yourself a great chance of getting green arrows. The main appeal about buying Matheus Cunha was about Blank Gameweek 34 facing Leicester at home, which was such an easy game on paper, and he delivered big time with 1 goal and 2 assists. Those that captain him obviously got a very good rank rise from it, but I think now it is definitely worth holding on to him and reassessing the situation. With the current predicament we find ourselves in with Double Gameweek 36 and Blank Gameweek 37, if that ends up happening, we did get a tweet by Ben Krellin and he said the following: Man City versus Bournemouth and Palace versus Wolves will have to move from the weekend of Gameweek 37 to either the midweek in Gameweek 36 or the midweek in Gameweek 37, and the midweek in 37 is more likely. Spurs have requested that Villa versus Spurs be moved from the weekend of Gameweek 37 to the midweek in Gameweek 36, so they did not have to play the game on the Sunday before a potential Europa League final on the Wednesday. Chelsea versus United is already scheduled for the Friday before the Europa League final, so that fixture won't need to move. So the possible Double Gameweek 36 fixtures could be Spurs versus Crystal Palace at home and Aston Villa away, Aston Villa facing Bournemouth at home and Tottenham at home. Man City could face Southampton away and Bournemouth at home simultaneously. Bournemouth will face Aston Villa at home and Man City away. Crystal Palace would have Tottenham away and Wolves at home, and then Wolves would face Brighton at home and Crystal Palace away. And he also concludes this tweet with, "We're very likely to get confirmation of whether those 3 fixtures will move to Gameweek 36 or stay in Gameweek 37 before the Gameweek 35 deadline." And we also got an update by John Townley, and he did state that Aston Villa have written to the Premier League to emphatically reject Tottenham's request to bring forward their fixture at Villa Park next month. So if that ends up being accepted and the Premier League listen to Aston Villa, that fixture will remain in Gameweek 37, and that means no double for Tottenham or Aston Villa there. So Spurs want that game to be played on Thursday, the May 15th, to allow more time to prepare for a possible Europa League final. So that's kind of what we've got at the moment, and it's very important to wait for that information. But Cunha could double in Gameweek 36, making him a purchase once more against Man City away, and then Brighton at home and Crystal Palace away with 3 fixtures in a matter of 2 game weeks. Then you sell him in Blank Gameweek 37 if that turns out to be the case. And I think in any other scenario where we don't have any doubles or blanks, I think Matheus Cunha is a hold. He has 15 goals and 7 assists this season. 41 bonus points is incredible, just like Chris Wood. They are talismanic figures, and I think Cunha is actually better than him in this regard with the bonus points. Everything that Wolves do goes through Cunha. He can just get 1 assist and still get maximum bonus, and that means he's got 173 FPL points this season, and his price has gone up significantly in recent weeks to 7 million following his return from suspension. And his underlying stats aren't anything special. I think the creativity is more impressive than the goal scoring. Only 7 big chances for Cunha this season, but he scored 15 goals, the XG is 7.34, but 12 big chance created and 52 key passes is decent for a forward, and I think he's one of the best strikers in Fantasy Premier League, with a mixed bag in terms of fixtures, but a potential double in Gameweek 36 makes him very appealing. Recently, I highlighted Jean-Philippe Mateta as a sell. He had the blank in 34. He actually missed a penalty in the FA Cup final, but also got an assist. And he also got a great goal against Arsenal off the bench in Double Gameweek 33. And he does face Nottingham Forest at home, Tottenham away, Wolves at home, and Liverpool away. So the fixtures aren't the greatest. And with Crystal Palace focusing on that FA Cup final, they could rotate heavily in Gameweek 36, even if that ends up being a double Gameweek there for Crystal Palace, which would make Mateta very appealing. I think he is worth holding in some scenarios, but the best forwards in FPL right now include Cunha, Chris Wood, and Alexander Isak, I think, but you've also got Marmoush, who over the next 2 game weeks looks like the best option on paper. Mateta has 13 goals, 2 assists, 26 big chances, and 136 FPL points. He actually started the season quite slowly, just like Crystal Palace, but in recent months he has really gone up in terms of his form, and whilst he had that injury in the FA Cup which halted his momentum, I think he is still a very good asset in this forward line, and still in that top 5, I would argue, but Vissa is also ahead of him in that pecking order. And in terms of Crystal Palace assets, I think Mateta remains the best or second best option alongside Daniel Munoz. And you've also got Eze in the midfield. Ismaila Sarr is decent for the price, but also very inconsistent. He got a brace and an assist against Aston Villa in the FA Cup semi-final. But for some reason, Sarr just loves playing against them in particular, with 5 goals and 2 assists in 3 appearances against the Villains this season. And Mateta has an XG figure of 12.27, 7 big chance created, and 27 key passes with 62 shots overall. He is fairly clinical, but Mateta also has those odd games where he does miss many big chances, and he's not the most reliable from the penalty spot. But I think he's a good FPL option and worth holding in many scenarios. One of my best purchases on the Gameweek 30 wildcard has undoubtedly been Jacob Murphy, with only 1 blank in that time frame, and I benched him against Aston Villa regardless. And on the Gameweek 34 free hit, I actually went for Jacob Murphy over Harvey Barnes and gained 3 points in the process, and he has had some massive returns in certain game weeks like 31, so I'm very happy with Jacob Murphy, and hopefully he continues this for the rest of the season. But I think the fixtures are tougher now, and there is a case to sell Jacob Murphy, but I still think for that price tag, you're going to get great value there, and he's also a bit of a flat track bully, so you could argue that the best is now behind Jacob Murphy and you could move him on. For example, if you sell Saka to Mbeumo, then have 3 or 4 million in the bank, you can use that to go from Murphy to Jarrod Bowen. In that scenario, I would recommend it, but at a similar price, I still think Murphy is one of the better options in the game. He has 8 goals, 12 fantasy assists, an XGI figure of 10.99 and 149 FPL points. His ownership is also much higher now than it was before Gameweek 30 at 18.4%, and his price is still very attainable at 5.3 million, and all the stats are fairly solid for a budget midfielder. 10 big chances, 15 big chance created, 38 key passes, and an XG figure of 5.77. So I think Jacob Murphy is worth holding, and compared to Harvey Barnes, you could argue that Murphy is more at risk actually. With Anthony Gordon back in the fray, we're seeing that substitution happen very frequently, but at that price and below, you're not going to find much better value than Jacob Murphy. Bukayo Saka started the season very well, then had that injury on the 21st of December, which saw him ruled out for many months, and Arsenal struggled in his absence, and he scored upon his return against Fulham as a substitute, but it has been very frustrating ever since. He scored in the Champions League against Real Madrid back in matchday 14 there, but on the whole, it has been fairly disappointing from a goals and assist perspective for Bukayo Saka. He does face Southampton away in Gameweek 38, and I don't mind him against Bournemouth and Newcastle at home on paper, but Arsenal are trailing in the Champions League semi-final. They're 1-0 down against PSG on aggregate, and that'll be their full focus because it really comes down to that competition. That's the only thing Arsenal can win now, and I think they could rotate against Bournemouth. Now, Saka could still start the game, but I still think he could be subbed off early, especially for Wanyeri or other options in that position like Sterling. So I don't think Saka will get 90 minutes, far from it, but if you're asking me to kind of guess if he starts or not, my current prediction is that he does start against Bournemouth, but he's subbed off quite early on, around 50-60 minutes. And whilst Arsenal have nothing to play for really in the Premier League, if they keep losing the next couple of games or dropping points, they could be at risk of dropping out of the top 4. I know that the top 5 do qualify for Europe next season, but it is still not good for the optics, you could say, dropping that much and being so consistent in the last 2 seasons and pushing Man City all the way, a great Man City side in the Premier League era, and then really falling short this season when there's only been one good team in this campaign, and that's been Liverpool. So I think Saka will start, but that isn't guaranteed, and honestly, I wouldn't mind personally seeing Saka on the bench and making an appearance in the last 20-30 minutes, and he is sellable at this moment in time. For Gameweek 38 on the free hit or as a final 1-week punt, you can go for Saka against Southampton away, but I think he's definitely worth selling in some scenarios in Gameweek 35. He has 6 goals, 11 assists, 20 big chance created, but pretty much all of them were in the first half of the season. 118 points. His price remains 10.5 million, but he might not be too far off a price drop to 10.4 million there. His ownership is 22.8% at the time of this recording, but I would expect that to go down actually. For those that keep Saka, you could get a nice return from him as a differential, but I think the likes of Mbeumo and Bowen are more appealing for the next 4 game weeks, and they're significantly cheaper, so it does make it worthwhile to sell Saka to one of those options and then use the extra funds to then bolster other areas in your FPL team. This could age horribly wrong because Cole Palmer has gone 17 games without a goal across all competitions, and in a lot of videos I have said he's a hold. In some cases I talked about buying him, and he's just been a massive disappointment this season, particularly in the second half of the campaign, because he started off relatively well. He stat padded in certain games, but at least he had the ability to get a massive return and be a decent captaincy option from time to time. But I just think he has struggled without the penalties this season, and Chelsea have been very inconsistent in the second half of the season. A lot of people in the live streams have recently said maybe this is the effect of not having Mauricio Pochettino, who got the best out of Cole Palmer, or maybe last season I think Premier League teams didn't know what to expect with the youngster who has so much potential, and he is still a very good player, but now he's given less space, especially in those central areas, and he's struggling to make an impact in the final third. His upcoming fixtures are terrible, with the exception of Man United at home in Gameweek 37. But you've got Liverpool at home next, Newcastle away, and Nottingham Forest away over the next 4 game weeks. And Palmer has 14 goals, 10 fantasy assists. That's still very good, by the way, for a youngster, but I still feel like the last couple of months, especially since January, he has been very underwhelming. His ownership is 35.3%, but I'd expect that to drop significantly over the coming days, and I think his price could drop once more. And in terms of his price next season, I've been asked some questions about that recently, including a reaction stream. I think Palmer could go down to 10 million, but I'd be surprised if it goes down even further than that. And I do think he is still one of the better Chelsea assets overall. But what my kind of fear is that he's had this long goal drought. He has been absolutely poor in front of goal. He's not even getting many assists. And there is an element of misfortune there, particularly between December and January. But now, when he's got the tough fixtures and so many months of bad form, he now finally produces when you least expect him to, because that's how football can be sometimes, and Fantasy Premier League loves trolling us in many different ways. So Cole Palmer, it's always risky selling him, but I think at this point of the season, you can go to more reliable options like Brian Mbeumo and potentially Jared Bowen, who save you a lot of money in the process. This could end up being a mistake, but Liverpool have wrapped up the title and they've got some pretty poor fixtures over the next 4 game weeks on paper. You'd still expect 1 clean sheet, possibly even 2, and Arsenal will have played PSG just a few days beforehand, and I think Liverpool will win that game in 36 and maybe even keep a clean sheet, despite the FDR not suggesting a great chance of a clean sheet there. But Van Dijk has 2 goals, 1 assist this season. 20 shots inside the box is very impressive for a centre-back, but he's not getting that many goals or assists just yet. I think he's got 1 more goal in him, to be fair, and this is very circumstantial because this could be a very good enabler move for you. You go from Van Dijk to a cheaper defender, someone that I'll talk about in my best wildcard team video, for example, and have that sort of balanced structure in your defensive line, and then reinvest that money in the midfield and forward positions. So if you can do that by selling Van Dijk, I think it is worth selling him, but in isolation, you could definitely make a case of holding him despite the poor fixtures and his hefty price tag, and he could deliver a clean sheet and a goal at the very least over the next 4 game weeks. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. You may disagree with this classification, but Van Dijk has 135 FPL points this season, a very template ownership figure of 26.3%, and his price tag remains 6.7 million at the time of this recording. He has had 4 big chances, 12 key passes, pretty decent, like I said, for a centre-back, and his XG is 1.94. Now, I think Trent is more appealing. I went for him on the free hit compared to Van Dijk and gained 3 more points in the process, but these are ultimately small gains. But Trent does have the highest ceiling, and also he's a bit riskier in terms of minutes, with Conor Bradley offering decent competition. And Van Dijk is one of those players in that Liverpool team that are nailed on, and they play every single minute of every single game. So I think Liverpool will still get 2 or 3 wins from the remaining 4 matches and end this Premier League season in style. Morgan Rogers is currently a skip in my opinion, but if Aston Villa get that double in 36 and the Premier League somehow listen to Spurs and push that game towards Game Week 36 instead, then having a double game week for Rodgers and also facing Fulham at home this week, a team he scored against earlier this season, that would make Rodgers into a buy, you could say. And in some cases, you can definitely say he's worth holding on to. I've got Morgan Rogers myself, for example. But for those that are looking to invest new in a midfielder, I would skip Rodgers at the moment. But this is where the announcement comes in very handy. And maybe if things go differently than what we expect, and we get that Spurs-Aston Villa double game week phase 6 fixture, then Morgan Rogers turns into a buy for the next 2 game weeks. Then you sell him in for 37 because he blanks, or you just bench him if you have the squad depth. It is all relative, of course, and if Aston Villa have no more double game weeks and blanks for the rest of the season, I think Rogers could even be argued as a hold. So this is a very difficult one because there are 3 potential classifications for Rogers. I don't think he's necessarily a sell, but for those that don't have him yet, I would skip Morgan Rogers for the time being. He has 8 goals, 9 assists, 13 big chances, 145 FPL points, also a very high ownership of 23.9%, and his price tag is 5.7 million. He also has produced 13 big chance created, which is very impressive for a budget midfielder, and he has been very consistent in recent weeks in the Premier League, but he was very poor in the FA Cup semi-final. Just like many Aston Villa players, they look jaded, and Morgan Rogers just doesn't get a break. He surely should get some at one stage this season, but Aston Villa are still pushing for that Champions League spot, and it's looking very improbable at this moment in time. And whilst they have competed in a lot of competitions like the FA Cup and Champions League, things are tailing off for Unai Emery's side, and Rogers has been a key man all season, and I think he is probably the most nailed on Aston Villa attacker alongside Ollie Watkins because of Marcus Rashford's injury. One of my favourite one-week punts this week is Ollie Watkins. He has scored in the last 3 games against Fulham, and he has a decent record against them overall, and that's why he is my favourite Aston Villa attacker for Gameweek 35. Now, in the long term, I still think Rogers is the better option because he's significantly cheaper and also a big enabler, so it allows you to go for Marmoush, Visser, Cunha, Chris Wood, going for 3 of those forwards there, who are probably better than Watkins overall, but I do think Watkins is a nice differential for this week. Not many people will look to buy him against Fulham at home, which isn't the easiest of fixtures on paper. In the FDR, it is marked as a fairly difficult one, and you've also got Bournemouth away, Tottenham at home, and Man United away, so I don't think Watkins is a bad striker to end this Premier League season, but that's mainly because Rashford is injured and he won't play again for Aston Villa this season, and that could be the final appearance in an Aston Villa shirt. But Watkins has 15 goals, 7 assists, 36 big chances, and 168 FPL points. His ownership is 18.2%, and the price tag is 8.9 million. So going from Isak to Watkins could be a move that some people make, but not that many in the grand scheme of things. And Watkins has been a little bit underwhelming this season. I know those stats aren't that bad, actually, to be involved in 22 Premier League goals, but last season he had a similar amount of goals and also 18 to 19 FPL assists, but I do think he massively overperformed last season with the creativity, and I highlighted that multiple times last season. But he's a good all-round striker. He does miss a lot of big chances at times, and when he does take a penalty, that isn't necessarily a good thing because his record from the spot is pretty woeful. But Ollie Watkins is one of the best one-week punts for Gameweek 35. That concludes another Transits video and podcast, this time out of Gameweek 35. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, let's continue the conversation across all my social media platforms, which can be found in the description below. And on screen, you can see the most transferred out players at this point of the game week. Palmer is top, with Robinson, Ivanovic, Rashford and Joao Pedro in the top 5. But Ivanovic has now had his red card rescinded, and he will play against Arsenal this weekend. So if you do have Ivanovic still, you don't need to sell him necessarily. And against the rotated Arsenal side, you could find some joy against that Gunners defence. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you know when someone got uploaded live stream for both UCL Fantasy and FPL. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and check all the other links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further links to my videos, amongst many other perks. And once more, a big shout out goes to Napstars and Paredes for getting us so close to 100 members on YouTube. You can also check the Discord server, FPL League and Spotify, across many other podcast formats like Amazon Music. All of my content can be found there as well. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 35 and the rest of the season. Keep your eyes peeled for the best wildcard team, which should be out very soon, my team selection, and the deadline stream will be on Friday. Don't be hoodwinked, because usually we get those on the Saturday. We have a Friday deadline this time round, and more UCL fantasy content will be headed your way over the next couple of weeks.